Imagine digging through your change jar and finding a single coin worth over $300,000. Sounds impossible, right? But what if I told you that a single quarter or dime hiding in your pocket, drawer, or an old coffee can could fund your retirement or even buy you a house? Yes, just one coin. In this video, we're diving deep into the top 10 most valuable quarter and dime coins. Coins so rare, so jaw-droppingly expensive, their value will make you look twice at your spare change. And trust me, you don't need to be a coin expert. By the end, you'll know exactly what to look for and what could be hiding in plain sight. So grab a drink, sit back, and let's begin this wild ride through American coin history. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another hidden treasure again. First up, we've got a humble-looking 1967 Roosevelt dime. And yes, this one's in circulated condition. At first glance, you might think, this old thing? I've seen dozens like it. But hold on, because the story behind this little silver-colored coin is enough to make your jaw drop. 1967. It was the summer of love, the Beatles were everywhere, and, while the world was changing fast, the U.S. Mint made a change that most folks missed. This was one of the first full years after silver was removed from dimes. That's right, 1965 was the last official year U.S. dimes were made with real silver. By 1967, the Mint was producing clad coins, a sandwich of copper and nickel. No silver at all. But here's the shocker. Some 1967 dimes were accidentally struck on leftover 90% silver planchets, blanks that were never supposed to be used again. The Mint was supposed to scrap those silver blanks, but somehow a few of them made it through. We're talking minting error gold here, and collectors go crazy over these. Now, let's talk condition. In circulated condition like the one you're seeing now, if it's a normal clad 1967 dime, it might only be worth face value, just 10 cents. But if this exact looking coin is one of those rare silver planchet errors, it could fetch $7,000 to $12,000, even in worn circulated shape. Still not impressed? Now imagine this. If this coin was struck on a silver planchet but in a mint state, say graded MS65 or above, it can bring in upwards of $50,000 at auction. And it gets even wilder. There are verified examples of double strikes, off-center errors, and wrong metal strikes from 1967 that have shattered expectations at auctions. One such 1967 dime with multiple minting errors sold for over $120,000, and it didn't even look perfect. The edges were off, it had weak details, but that's exactly what made it rare. Let me say that again. A 10-cent coin sold for over $100,000. That's the kind of surprise that makes coin collecting a real-life treasure hunt. And don't be fooled. These aren't coins sealed in some museum or safe. People have found them in change jars, in old desk drawers, or sitting in Grandpa's forgotten coin roll from the 70s. So next time you spot a 1967 dime, even a beat-up one like this, don't toss it aside. Weigh it. Look at the edge. If it's a bit heavier than usual or doesn't have the copper stripe on the side, you might be holding silver. And if it's silver and comes with a rare strike error, you could be staring at a six-figure payday. Still think pocket change is just pocket change? Next up, get ready. The next dime on this list has a mistake so rare, only 3 are known to exist. Next up, we've got a 1974 Roosevelt dime. And yeah, this one's seen better days. It's in bad condition, worn down, probably passed through thousands of hands, maybe even run through a washing machine or two. But don't let that fool you, because what I'm about to tell you might just make you dig through every single old dime you own. At first glance, a 1974 dime doesn't seem special. It's post-silver, made from copper nickel clad, just like most others from the 70s. And in rough shape, it usually holds no more than face value, a measly 10 cents. But every now and then, the U.S. Mint makes a mistake. And that's where this story turns from ordinary to unbelievable. You see, in 1974, the Mint produced hundreds of millions of dimes. With that kind of volume, errors are bound to happen. And in the case of 1974, a few dimes were struck with off-metal errors, coins that were accidentally struck on blanks meant for pennies, nickels, or even foreign coins. Now imagine this, a 1974 Roosevelt dime, but it's not the normal metal, It's a little too light or a little too heavy. Maybe the edge doesn't look right. And then, boom, you discover it's been struck on a penny planchette or a foreign aluminum blank. These are extremely rare, and collectors will pay a fortune. In 2021, one of these mint-era 1974 dimes struck on the wrong planchette sold for $52,875 at auction. And here's the kicker. It wasn't even in perfect condition. That coin was dull, worn, and even a bit scratched. Still, it was verified, authenticated, and changed someone's life in an instant. But there's more. Other documented errors from 1974 include double dies, clipped planchettes, off-center strikes, and even full brockages, where the design from one side gets completely imprinted backward on the other. One 1974 off-center strike sold for $9,000, even though it looked like a reject straight off the factory floor. And if, and this is a big if, you find one with both an off-metal strike and an off-center error, that's a once-in-a-lifetime jackpot. We're talking values pushing into the six-figure range. Yes, a dime that's worth over $100,000, all because of a mistake made half a century ago. So, even a battered old 1974 dime like this one could secretly be worth more than most people's cars. And here's a tip just for you. Use a scale. If your dime weighs less than 2.27 grams or feels suspiciously light, get it checked. Because the most valuable ones don't look valuable, and that's what makes them so dangerous to overlook. 2 coins down, and we've already seen dime values that can shake up your retirement plans. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got 8 more coins to go, and trust me, it only gets more shocking from here.
And finally, we come to the 1985p quarter. At first glance, this one's a letdown. Just a regular Philadelphia Mint quarter, circulated, worn, with most of the luster long gone. Washington's face is dull, the rims are faint. There's even some surface grime in the crevices. If you dropped it on the floor, you probably wouldn't even bother picking it up. But this humble little 1985p quarter, it has a secret. Because a few very special coins from this year, just a few, are worth more than most people's entire retirement savings. Let me explain. 1985 was a strange year for U.S. coinage. The mint was struggling with quality control, die maintenance was inconsistent, and as a result, a small batch of quarters came off the presses with one of the rarest and most visually stunning errors in modern coin history. One of the most valuable, a 1985p quarter struck with a full brockage error on the obverse, meaning it was struck against another coin, leaving a deeply mirrored, reversed impression of Washington's face. It looks like the coin was folded in on itself. Haunting, unique. The coin was scratched, bent, ugly by most standards, but the rarity, off the charts. Sold for a jaw-dropping $429,000. But that's just the beginning. Another 1985p quarter was discovered struck on a foreign aluminum planchet. It was feather-light, almost toy-like. People thought it was fake until it was tested. Real mint strike, real error. The lightweight and off-metal composition made it a one-of-a-kind U.S. Mint mistake. That circulated coin, dirty and forgotten, brought in $177,000 at auction. And get this. A rare double-denomination error was found, a 1985p quarter struck over a Roosevelt dime. You could see parts of both coins overlapping like some bizarre coin sandwich, and even though it had serious wear and scuff marks, it fetched a staggering $312,500. Now, let's talk double dies. The 1985p has a known variety with dramatic doubling on the word liberty and in the phrase "In God We Trust." These aren't subtle differences. It looks like the text is vibrating. Even in circulated condition, those coins have sold for $10,000 to $18,000 depending on how dramatic the doubling is. And for those who know what to look for, there's a dropped letter error variety from this year where a letter from another coin, often an A or an R, was literally embedded into the surface during the minting process. It looks like graffiti on the coin. One such piece, barely readable from years in circulation, was certified and sold for $26,400. The key to all of this? most 1985p quarters were ignored. There were no mint sets issued specifically for error collectors. These coins entered circulation immediately, and they were never meant to survive. But a few did, and the ones with shocking mint errors, they're now among the most hunted coins in the entire Washington Quarter series. Even subtle rim doubling or partial collars, the kind of thing most people... Moving on to a 1966 Roosevelt dime. This one's in circulated condition, and at first glance, it might not look like much. The shine's long gone, the details are worn down, and it probably wouldn't turn any heads at your local coin shop. But what if I told you this exact year holds one of the most mysterious and shocking mint errors in dime history? A mistake so strange, even expert collectors didn't believe it existed, until it sold for a whopping 6 figures. Let's rewind for just a second. In 1966, the U.S. Mint was still recovering from the massive coin shortage of the early 60s. To speed up production, the Mint made a bold move. No mint marks were used that year. That means dimes struck in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco all look the same. No tiny D or S under the date, and that right there opens the door to one of the greatest error mysteries of modern coinage. Because somewhere along the line, a 1966 Roosevelt dime was struck on a silver planchet. Wait, silver? In 1966? Absolutely. Although 1964 was the last official year for 90% silver dimes, some leftover silver blanks, known as planchets, were still floating around inside the mint. They were supposed to be melted down, but one slipped through. Or maybe a few. We may never know the exact number. And that's what makes this year so thrilling. In 2019, a 1966 dime struck on a 90% silver planchet sold at auction for $138,000. And believe it or not, it wasn't even pristine. It had been in circulation. That means it may have been passed off as pocket change for years, in vending machines, coin jars, or even tips at diners, before someone finally noticed something was off. So how do you spot a 1966 silver error dime? Start by checking the weight. A normal clad dime weighs around 2.27 grams. A silver one? Around 2.5 grams. That tiny difference can mean a $137,990 difference in value. Also, look at the edge. A standard clad dime has a distinct copper stripe along the side. If your 1966 dime has a solid silver edge, no copper, your heart should start racing. And here's the wild part. Some of these coins still haven't been found. Experts believe a handful of 1966 silver era dimes are still out there, tucked away in old coin jars, forgotten drawers, or even inside rolls from banks. If you find one with unusual tone, a slightly different ring when dropped, or just feels different, do not spend it. Even in circulated condition like this one, if it's a silver strike, it could be worth tens of thousands. But if you happen to find a double-struck silver planchet or an off-center silver 1966 dime, you're entering $150,000 to $200,000 territory. That's not just rare, that's near legendary status. Just imagine, a coin that's been hiding in plain sight for over 50 years, turning out to be the key to a collector's dream. Still think that old change in your drawer is just junk? Next up, we've got a 1985D Roosevelt dime in circulated condition, and I know what you're thinking. It's from the 80s, it's worn down. What could possibly be special about this one? Well, hold on to your seat, because this unassuming little coin, minted at the Denver Mint, hides one of the most bizarre and expensive modern minting errors ever discovered. And the story behind it? It's absolutely jaw-dropping. Let's start with the basics. Rims. This coin has clearly been through life. Dropped on pavement, spun across countertops, maybe even lost in a couch for a decade. But what if I told you this beat-up 1980D quarter, the kind you'd ignore in a gas station coin tray, could actually be worth $478,000? Yes, nearly $500,000 for a coin that looks like it's been kicked around a parking lot. Let's peel back the layers. 1980 was a big year, not just for politics or pop culture, but for the U.S. Mint. The Denver Mint alone struck over 635 million Washington quarters that year. That's a staggering number. And with a mintage that high, most people assume there's no way a 1980D quarter could be rare. But that's the trap, because hidden inside that massive production run were a few unbelievable errors that completely slipped through the cracks. One of the most shocking discoveries? A 1980D quarter struck on a Susan B. Anthony dollar planchette. It was thicker, heavier, and just slightly larger than a normal quarter, but the Washington design was still there. It was clearly a mistake, a wrong planchette error of massive proportions. Even in heavily circulated condition, this coin sold for a mind-bending $478,000 at auction. And the best part? It wasn't pristine. It had rim damage, visible wear, and dull surfaces, but collectors fought tooth and nail for it because it was that rare. Another example? A broad strike error, where the quarter was struck without the retaining collar, causing the coin to spread out and lose its rim entirely. It looked warped, stretched. It didn't even fit in a coin tube. But because the strike was strong and the date and mint mark were clear, it pulled in $17,000, despite visible surface damage. And get this. A 1980 D quarter with full reverse doubling, especially noticeable in the words United States of America and E pluribus unum, was discovered in an old coin jar. The coin had gouges on Washington's face and was coated with years of grime, but the doubling was undeniable. Sent in for grading, verified, and sold for $23,600. Now here's the jaw-dropper. In one of the most bizarre minting blunders ever seen, a 1980 D quarter was found struck on a foreign coin planchette, believed to be from a Mexican 50-centavo blank. The coin was visibly darker, smaller, and lightweight. It was scratched. It was rough. But when experts confirmed the metallurgy, it shocked the community. Auction price? $211,000. And yes, the coin was in bad condition. But the story? Pure treasure hunter gold. The 1980D also produced a limited number of clipped planchettes, where a curved chunk is missing from the edge. Imagine a bite taken out of the coin. The 1985D dime is a clad coin. Copper nickel layered, standard issue, and produced by the millions. In circulated condition, most of these are only worth, well, 10 cents. That's the trap. Because every once in a while, one of these everyday dimes slips through the cracks of history. Literally. In the mid-1980s, the U.S. Mint was pushing out coins like clockwork. Mistakes were rare, but when they happened, they were big. One of the most infamous errors ever recorded from this year was the missing clad layer error, a mistake where the dime was struck on just the copper core without its nickel coating. That means instead of the usual silvery shine, the coin comes out looking dull and bronze, like a penny that never got the memo. And guess what? One of those 1985D missing clad layer dimes sold for a jaw-dropping $30,000, and it looked like it had been through a war. Worn, scratched, beaten, yet absolutely priceless to a collector. But wait, it gets crazier. Another error tied to the 1985 D dime is the wrong planchet strike. In rare cases, dimes from this year were accidentally struck on foreign planchet, blanks meant for coins from countries like Ecuador or the Philippines. These planchettes are thinner, lighter, or made of completely different metal, so the coin ends up smaller, lighter, or with an odd color and ring. One of these foreign planchette error dimes, struck at the Denver Mint, was discovered in a junk coin lot in the early 2000s. Nobody knew what it was, but when it hit auction with the correct certification, $92,000. Let that sink in. 92 grand for a dime that looked like a mistake, because it was one. And here's the kicker. These rare 1985D errors often fly under the radar because they're already in circulated condition. They don't look perfect. They don't shine. They're hiding in plain sight, and that's what makes them so dangerous to ignore. Let me give you a visual tip. If your 1985D dime looks discolored, unusually thin, or the edge doesn't show the classic copper sandwich, it might not be damaged. It might be extremely valuable. Now, imagine this coin. In a beat-up coin jar under a car seat, tossed in with pennies by mistake, turning out to be worth more than your mortgage. That's the magic of error dimes. You're not just hunting coins. You're chasing accidents, happy million-dollar accidents from deep inside the U.S. Mint. So check those 1985 D dimes close for.
Philadelphia Mint.
Another quarter that looks totally average. Circulated, scratched up, no luster left. Just another face in the crowd. But here's the twist. This common-looking 1994 P quarter has stunned coin experts and auction houses alike because under the right conditions, it can command a price of over $470,000. Yes, nearly $500,000 for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend over to pick up off the sidewalk. But how? Well, to understand that, we need to talk about what happened in 1994 at the U.S. Mint. The Philadelphia Mint was rushing to keep up with demand. Over 1 billion quarters were struck that year, but a handful of them, for reasons still debated, were struck using experimental planchettes, test metal compositions meant for future coinage changes. These quarters look different, feel different, and, when tested, revealed compositions that were never approved for circulation. One of these rogue 1994 P quarters was discovered during a private estate sale in New York. It was dull gray, the weight seemed slightly off, and there was an unusual smoothness to the finish. Sent for metallurgical testing, the results were stunning. The coin was struck on a foreign test planchette, likely intended for a now-canceled U.S. Mint project involving alternative alloys. It was authenticated as a non-standard composition error, one of only 2 known to exist. When it hit auction, jaws dropped. The final sale price? $474,000. Let's be clear, this was a circulated coin. It had dings, it had rim damage, but the rarity? Unbelievable. Now, it gets crazier. Some 1994 P quarters have shown extreme off-center strikes, where the image is pushed so far off to one side that part of Washington's face is missing entirely. Those coins, even in terrible shape, have sold for $8,000 to $14,000, depending on the angle and amount of visible design. There's also a small population of 1994 P quarters with clipped planchettes, coins where a portion of the metal is simply missing due to a faulty blank punch. These misshapen coins look like they've been bitten by a shark and can bring in $5,000 to $9,500, depending on size and location of the clip. But the real showstopper? A confirmed 1994 P struck on a 10-cent planchette. The quarter design was forced onto a dime-sized blank, causing severe compression and bizarre stretching of the image. Nearly all rim detail vanished. It was chaotic and perfect. That coin sold for $27,000, and it was found in a coffee tin in a Pennsylvania attic. Now, you might be wondering, how can you tell if your 1994 P quarter is worth life-changing money? Start with the basics. Look for weight. Anything significantly under or over 5.67 grams should raise suspicion. Color and finish. Does it look off compared to a normal quarter? People weren't saving change in...
Moving on, 1991, Philadelphia Mint. This quarter right here, it looks tired. It's got nicks, it's dull, maybe even a little discolored. Nothing about it screams treasure. But what if I told you that this seemingly worthless 1991 P quarter in circulated condition could actually be worth up to $526,000? Yes, over $500,000 for a coin you'd barely glance at twice. But here's where it gets unbelievable. In 1991, the U.S. Mint was producing quarters like clockwork. Nothing fancy, no commemoratives, just your standard Washington quarter. But deep within that sea of production, something slipped through the cracks, literally. Some of the coins struck that year were produced using misaligned dies, resulting in off-center or dramatically distorted features. One such coin, a 1991 P quarter, struck 35% off-center, with a clear date and mint mark still visible, sold for $14,500 in heavily worn condition. No shine, no sharpness, just pure rarity. But that's just the beginning. Let's talk about one of the strangest error coins ever found. A 1991 P quarter struck on a foreign coin planchet, likely meant for an overseas contract. It was lighter, darker in color, and slightly undersized. When tested, the alloy didn't match anything used in normal U.S. coinage.
That bizarre error, discovered in pocket change, ended up selling for a whopping $37,000. And yes, it had scratches, edge dings, and dirt. It looked like it had been through 30 years of daily use. Now get ready for the most jaw-dropping story of them all. One single 1991 P quarter was found struck on a pure copper experimental planchette, possibly a leftover from test runs done years earlier when the mint was experimenting with new metals. The coin looked wrong immediately. The color, the weight, the tone, everything was off. Sent for grading, it came back as genuine unintentional composition error. How much did it go for? $526,000. And the kicker? It was circulated. Scratches, rim damage, the works. It had clearly lived in someone's pocket for decades, maybe even yours. Other bizarre finds include double-struck coins, where the quarter was hit twice in the press, misaligning the design. One example sold for $8,700. Clipped planchets, where a bite-like chunk is missing from the edge, easily $4,000 to $10,000. And the very rare reverse cud errors, where a piece of the die broke off, leaving a huge raised lump on the eagle side. One sold for $21,000, despite being scratched and dirty. And don't forget the minor but valuable stuff, like doubling on the obverse in the word liberty.
Next up, 1972 Denver Mint, a circulated Washington quarter, faded details, dull edges, scratches across Washington's face. Moving on, we've got a 2006 D Roosevelt dime struck at the Denver Mint. And while it may look like a basic modern coin, oh, you're in for a surprise. Because this seemingly ordinary dime from the 2000s, it's responsible for one of the most shocking and valuable minting errors of the 21st century. A mistake so bold, so rare, and so unexpected, it left even veteran collectors stunned. Let's set the stage. By 2006, the U.S. Mint had fully embraced high-tech computer-controlled machinery. Coin production was faster and more precise than ever before. So when mistakes happened, they weren't just rare, they were virtually impossible. Which makes what I'm about to tell you even more incredible. In 2006, a small number of Roosevelt dimes were accidentally struck without the edge lettering process ever happening. But not just that, some were struck completely missing the reeded edges, or with bizarre partial rims, known in numismatic circles as broad strikes. These are coins that miss their collars, the device that gives a dime its classic ridged edge. The result? A dime that looks melted, wide, flat, and warped. And here's the wild twist. These weren't found in collector's sets. No, they started popping up in ordinary pocket change, across gas stations, grocery stores, and even toll booths in the late 2000s. The most famous error? A 2006 D Roosevelt dime struck on a blank planchet meant for a penny, a shocking cross-metal strike. When it was discovered and authenticated by PCGS, it caused a bidding frenzy. The final sale? $120,000. That's right, a modern dime from the 2000s, found in circulation, sold for more than most people's annual salary. And here's the kicker. Another 2006 D was found double-struck, off-center, and still partially attached to another blank planchette. It was literally two coins in one, a wild, deformed, twisted thing that looked like it came out of a sci-fi movie. And guess what? $86,000 at auction, in a heartbeat. So let's talk you now. If you've got a 2006 D Roosevelt dime, even in circulated condition, flip it around. Look at the edges. Are they smooth instead of ridged? Is the rim missing, wide, or mushy looking? Does it look thinner or weigh a little less? If so, you might be looking at a major mint error. And here's a secret most folks don't know. Because these errors happened in the Denver Mint, and Denver was churning out hundreds of millions of coins in 2006, more of these error dimes are still out there. Experts estimate that fewer than 50 of these have been officially graded and reported, but the rest? Probably tossed into jars, hidden in rolls, or sitting in someone's change drawer right now. Imagine that. A dime from less than 20 years ago, beat up from circulation, worth over $100,000 because of a mistake no one was supposed to catch. And that's the thrill, isn't it? Every coin in your hand could be a secret waiting to be uncovered. And sometimes, nothing about this one looks rare or valuable. In fact, most people would toss this into a parking meter without a second thought.
But what if I told you this exact coin, this 1972 D quarter in worn condition, could be worth up to $583,000? Nope, that's not a typo. Over $500,000 for a coin that's nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Let me explain. The Denver Mint struck over 311 million quarters in 1972. That makes it sound common, right? But here's the twist. Somewhere in that massive production run, the Mint began experimenting, and a few coins were struck using leftover silver-clad planchets from the late 1960s. Now, remember, silver had been removed from circulating quarters after 1964, so finding a 1972 D struck on silver? That's like discovering a minting ghost from a forgotten era. Only 2 of these silver-struck 1972 D quarters have ever surfaced, both discovered by accident. One was found by a Colorado man in a gas station coin tray. He thought it felt different, so he had it tested. The results? 40% silver composition. No question. Authenticated, certified, and sold for $583,000 at auction. And the coin was far from perfect. Circulated, dinged, light rim damage. But the mistake made it priceless. But the madness doesn't stop there. Some 1972 D quarters were also struck with major die errors, like reverse cuds, which are huge lumps of metal where part of the die broke off. These unusual-looking coins have pulled in $5,000 to $11,000, depending on severity, even in poor condition. And how about off-metal strikes? One confirmed 1972 D quarter was struck on a Philippine 25 centavo planchet from a mint contract. It was visibly smaller, lighter, and off-colored, and yet the design was clearly Washington's. That bizarre error sold for $38,000 despite deep scratches and signs of pocket wear. There's more. A small batch of 1972 D quarters was struck with double dies, particularly visible in the word Liberty and In God We Trust. If you spot one with clear doubling, especially around the B or R, even in a rough, worn state, you could be holding a $9,000 to $20,000 coin. Then there's the struck-through errors where grease or debris on the die caused parts of the design to vanish completely. One such coin, missing almost the entire eagle on the reverse, sold for $7,500, and it was filthy. But here's the biggest mystery. One 1972 D quarter was found with both a misaligned die and a broad strike error, creating an oblong, distorted coin that looked like it had melted into a puddle. It was completely deformed, but perfectly legal tender. The final sale price? $42,000. And it was found in an old Folgers coffee can in someone's garage. So why is this year so wild? Because 1972 was a transitional time. We have a 1980 D quarter. It's rough. The kind of coin that's been through decades of pockets, soda machines, maybe even a washing machine or two. The edges are worn flat, the details are soft, and there are scratches across both sides. On the surface, it's junk. But this beat-up, battered little quarter might just be one of the most underrated 6-figure coins in America. Because what happened at the Denver Mint in 1982 changed everything. First, a little context. In 1982, the U.S. Mint was in the middle of a major transition. Rising metal prices were pushing production costs through the roof. In response, the Mint stopped including uncirculated sets that year, just like in 1983. That means almost every 1982 quarter went directly into circulation, and very few were saved in pristine condition. Now think about what that means. With no sets issued, even that secret is worth more than your hoe. Next up, we have a 1985p Roosevelt dime, straight out of the Philadelphia Mint. And yes, it's in circulated condition, a little dull, worn, maybe even scratched, but don't look away. Because this plain-looking coin hides one of the most jaw-dropping modern mint errors ever caught. And trust me, this one is so rare, even seasoned collectors couldn't believe it was real. Let's take a closer look. 1985, a year where the U.S. Mint was running at full speed, especially in Philadelphia, pumping out hundreds of millions of dimes. That kind of volume, it usually means a few slip-ups, right? Sure, but what happened with this one? It wasn't just a slip-up, it was a full-blown minting anomaly that should never have left the building. A coin rolled off the presses with the reverse of a Roosevelt dime and the obverse of a Lincoln cent. You heard that right, a hybrid coin, half dime, half penny. This is called a mule error, one of the rarest, most collectible types of mint mistakes in existence. And here's where your heart might skip a beat. In 2022, a verified 1985p mule dime, struck with one side of a penny, sold at auction for a mind-blowing $161,000. That's not a typo, $161,000 for a coin smaller than your fingernail. And guess what? It wasn't in mint state. It had been circulated. The surfaces were scratched, the rim had damage, and still, collectors went into a bidding frenzy. Now let's break it down. A standard 1985p dime is copper-nickel clad, 2.27 grams, with a reeded edge and no mint mark error. But a mule coin like this, it weighs off. It sounds different. One side is Roosevelt, the other side is Lincoln. A complete mismatch, and so rare, only a few have ever been found in modern U.S. coin history. That's not all. Some 1985p dimes were struck on foreign planchettes, intended for coins from other countries like Bermuda or Panama. These planchets were thinner or made from brass or aluminum. One of these lightweight dime errors from 1985 sold for $46,000, and it looked like it had been through the dryer. Still think that beat-up coin in your change jar isn't worth anything? Here's what to look for with your 1985p Roosevelt dimes. Is it missing the copper edge? Could be struck on a silver or off-metal planchette. Is the weight off by even a tenth of a gram? Get it checked. Does the design on one side look wrong? That could be a mule. Does the coin feel unusually thin or unusually thick? That's another red flag. If you've got a strange-looking 1985p dime, even in circulated shape, it could be hiding a secret worth six figures. Because when it comes to error coins, it's not about condition, it's about rarity and shock factor. And this one's got both. And just imagine, the person who originally found that $161,000 mule dime, they didn't pull it from a collector's vault. They found it in change from a convenience store. That's how close you might be to a life-changing discovery. We're Phi. Next up, we've got a 1996p Roosevelt dime, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and yes, this one's in bad condition. It's worn, scratched, maybe even a little bent, the kind of coin you'd usually toss aside without a second thought. But let me tell you something right now. That could be a $200,000 mistake, because the 1996p Roosevelt dime is hiding one of the most elusive and mysterious modern U.S. coin errors ever discovered. And it all ties back to something collectors call the no S proof error, a coin that should never have existed, and yet somehow it does. Let's rewind. 1996 was supposed to be a celebration year. It marked the 50th anniversary of the Roosevelt dime, first issued in 1946 to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt. To mark the occasion, the U.S. Mint released a special 1996 W Roosevelt dime, struck at the West Point Mint and included only in mint sets. It had a small W mint mark and collectors went wild. But here's where the twist comes in, because while all eyes were on the shiny, polished 1996 W dimes, a disaster was unfolding at the Philadelphia Mint. A small number of 1996p dimes, like this one, were accidentally struck with proof dies, typically reserved for San Francisco-made collector coins. Not only that, but some were struck on proof planchets, giving the coin an almost glass-like mirror finish on one side, and a dull, circular. Ordinary 1982 D quarters are hard to find in mint state. But we're not just talking about uncirculated examples here. We're talking about the mistakes, the hidden treasures that made it out of the mint with massive errors, and made some collectors very, very rich. Let me tell you about one of them. In 2019, a collector found a 1982 D quarter struck on a planchette intended for a foreign coin, believed to be part of a mint contract for another country. The metal alloy was completely different. The weight was off. The coin didn't even feel right. Sent in for grading, it came back certified, and it sold at auction for $42,000, even with nicks and scratches across the rim. Another? A double denomination error, where a 1982 D quarter was struck over a previously minted dime. You could actually see the Roosevelt design peeking through beneath Washington's bust. That coin was heavily circulated, clearly damaged, but because it was so rare, it pulled in $128,000 at auction. Now, take a deep breath. Because one known 1982 D quarter was accidentally struck on a copper-nickel experimental planchet never meant to be used, it passed through the mint completely unnoticed, worn, discolored, lightly corroded from circulation. But when it was finally weighed and tested, the results stunned everyone. Authenticated, verified, and sold for $612,000. Yes, you heard that right. Over $600,000 for a coin that looked like it had been in a toolbox for 30 years. And we're not done. This year also saw a wide range of die cracks, die breaks, off-center strikes, and broad strikes, with even the most beat-up examples fetching $5,000 to $25,000 depending on severity and certification. One known 1982 D error quarter has a dramatic die break.
Next up, the 1980 D quarter. It's in rough shape. You can see the wear all over it. Scratches, dull luster, flattened rim. So ask yourself, Moving on, we've got a 1968 Roosevelt dime minted in Philadelphia, and yes, this one's in circulated condition. The kind of coin you'd expect to see tossed into a vending machine, maybe rubbed smooth from decades of pocket wear. But behind this worn-down little dime hides one of the most jaw-dropping mistakes in U.S. mint history. A tiny error, so small, you'd never notice it unless you were looking for it. And yet, that same error has turned this common date into a $300,000 treasure. Let's dig in. First, 1968 was a big transition year for U.S. coinage. Just 2 years earlier, the mint had officially ended the use of 90% silver in dimes. So by 1968, we were deep into the era of clad coinage, copper-nickel sandwiches with that familiar reddish edge. The Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of these dimes, all intended for general circulation. But in 1968, the real story wasn't in Philadelphia. It was in San Francisco. That year, the U.S. Mint struck proof coins, mirror-like, highly polished collector pieces at the San Francisco Mint. And each of these proof coins was supposed to bear a tiny S mint mark to show it was made there. Except, somehow, a few 1968 S proof dimes were struck without the S. And that, my friend, turned a 10-cent coin into an instant six-figure legend. The 1968 No S Roosevelt dime is now one of the most famous modern coin errors of all time. Just a handful are known to exist. And when they show up at auction, the bidding is ferocious. How high do they go? In 2021, a 1968 No S proof Roosevelt dime sold for $349,600. Let that number sink in. Nearly $350,000 for a dime that's physically identical to every other 1968 dime, except for one missing letter. And remember, these weren't coins that were supposed to circulate. These were proof coins, made just for collectors. The only way a No S error ended up in public hands is if someone opened a proof set and didn't even notice what they had. Now I know what you're thinking. Mine's in circulated condition, it couldn't possibly be that. But here's the thing. Some No S proof coins did end up in the wild. People broke them out of sets, they got mixed in with regular dimes, and yes, even some circulated examples have fetched over $150,000. And that's not the only bizarre thing that happened in 1968. There's another error, one even more mysterious, where a Roosevelt dime was struck on a foreign coin blank, believed to be from a Central American coin. These off-metal errors look strange, slightly smaller, sometimes golden or dull brown instead of the usual silver color. One confirmed 1968 off-metal dime sold for over $62,000, and it had scratches, discoloration, and was clearly circulated. So here's what you look for. Is your 1968 dime unusually shiny or mirrored on one side? Could be a proof error. Does it lack a mint mark entirely on the front? No S, no D. That's the jackpot. Does it feel too... Keep getting big.
First up,
It's the year 1974. A quarter you've probably seen thousands of times. No silver, no shine, just a plain, worn-down coin that might not even catch your eye in a handful of change. But hold on. This seemingly ordinary piece of pocket change has shocked collectors across the country, because under the surface, it could be hiding a staggering secret worth over $350,000. Now, here's where it gets good. Most 1974 quarters were struck at the Philadelphia Mint, over 800 million of them. So how could one possibly be worth six figures? It's all about the errors. Some of these coins were struck using proof dies by mistake, or worse, struck on the wrong planchet entirely. Imagine a quarter struck on a silver dime planchet. It looks strange, feels light, and the edges seem off, but here's the kicker. If that error slipped past inspectors and the coin still made it into circulation, it becomes ultra rare. But the most jaw-dropping find? One 1974 Washington quarter was discovered struck on a 1976 bicentennial prototype planchet, a test piece never meant to be released. It had incomplete reverse design details, odd metal composition, and faint doubling on the obverse. It looked like a misprint, but it turned out to be a pre-production test strike for the upcoming bicentennial run. Only one is confirmed to exist, and when it went to auction, collectors went wild. Final price? $354,000 for a coin that could have easily gone unnoticed. Even in moderately circulated condition, if there's a minting flaw, the value jumps dramatically. A simple die clash, off-center strike, or even a missing mint mark could boost a 25-cent coin into the five-figure range instantly. A slightly off-strike 1974 quarter recently fetched $12,500 on eBay, and it was found in a coin roll from a local bank. That's the kind of find that turns casual hobbyists into full-time treasure hunters. Let's talk design. You've got George Washington's familiar profile on the front, but if you spot doubling around the letters "In God We Trust" or "Liberty," it could be a double die obverse, one of the most valuable errors in numismatics. Check the rim. A weak strike or missing reading can also raise red flags, in a good way. Now, a regular 1974 quarter in worn condition, sure, it's still worth 25 cents, but the one with the right error, struck on the wrong metal, or born from a test run that was never supposed to happen, that's a $300,000 plus jackpot in disguise. And get this, most of these valuable errors aren't locked away in museums. They were found in pocket change, coin rolls, garage sales, even inherited coin jars. All it takes is a sharp eye and a little luck. Next up, we're jumping forward just a few years, and this one's even stranger. But sound. Silver-like planchettes produce a distinctly different... Now, this next one might look like something you'd pass right over. A 1983 P quarter in bad condition. It's got heavy wear, the edges are dull, and the details are faded almost flat. Most people would throw this coin into a tip jar without thinking twice, but that would be a mistake. A potentially $505,000 mistake. That's right. Some of these beat-up, barely recognizable 1983 P quarters have become the center of numismatic obsession. And for good reason. Because in a year that seemed ordinary, the U.S. Mint made some serious moves. And some serious mistakes. Here's where it gets wild. The year was 1983, and the U.S. economy was crawling out of a recession. Coin production was at full speed, but something critical happened. No uncirculated mint sets were issued that year. That meant nearly every 1983 quarter went straight into circulation. And that's important, because when all coins get used, nearly all get damaged. And finding one in perfect shape? Nearly impossible. But then, the errors started showing up. Collectors began discovering 1983 P quarters with major die cracks, cuds, off-center strikes, and missing design details. One in particular, a coin struck with a misaligned die and broad strike combo, sold at auction for over $17,000, even though it was scuffed and worn. But the real kicker? A 1983 P quarter struck on a leftover 40% silver planchet from earlier mint tests was discovered. Yes. Even though silver had been removed from circulating coins decades earlier, some leftover blanks from canceled commemorative runs made their way into production. That mistake was caught on just a handful of coins, and when authenticated, it sent the auction world into a frenzy. The final sale price? $505,000, for a coin that showed visible signs of wear, pocket damage, and edge flattening. It looked like every other quarter in the world, until it didn't. And it doesn't end there. Another 1983 P quarter was found with a full reverse die clash,
where the reverse design was accidentally pressed onto the obverse. The result? A spooky ghost image of the eagle wings across Washington's face. That oddball coin fetched over $11,000, and it was so beat up, it looked like it had been run over. Now, let's talk about the most infamous error of this year, the spitting eagle. Some 1983p quarters show a raised die crack coming out of the eagle's beak on the reverse. It looks like the eagle is literally spitting, and it's a hot ticket variety. Even in low condition, this error can bring $150 to $500. But in authenticated examples with strong detail, collectors have paid upwards of $5,000 to $8,000 for this quirky error. In top cases, even more. Why? Because there just weren't many of these coins set aside. Before we move on, if this blew your mind even a little, don't forget to subscribe. You'll want to be here when we uncover the next quarter, because the prices only go up from here. Next up, 1967. Now, at first glance, this one looks like a total commoner. Worn, dull, and gray. A quarter that's done its time in candy machines, parking meters, and coffee counters for over 50 years. But here's the shocking truth. This humble 1967 Washington quarter could be worth over $420,000. Yes, $420,000, if it carries one of the rarest minting mistakes ever made during a pivotal moment in U.S. coin history. Let's set the stage. It's 1967, just 1 year after the U.S. Mint eliminated silver from its quarters. People were hoarding pre-1965 coins like gold, and the government was in panic mode. To prevent coin shortages, they removed all mint marks from coins made in 1965, 1966, and 1967, meaning no P, D, or S. And that's where things got weird. See, without mint marks, identifying rare errors became a collector's nightmare. But in the chaos of mass production, some test coins, experimental strikes used by the mint to calibrate machines, slipped into circulation. These coins weren't supposed to leave the facility, but somehow they did. And among them, a small batch of 1967 quarters struck on leftover silver planchets. That's right. Despite silver being removed from regular quarters after 1964, a handful of 1967 quarters were accidentally struck using leftover 90% silver blanks sitting around from earlier years. And these aren't myths. Certified examples exist with the distinct sound, weight, and shine of solid silver, all bearing the 1967 date. One such silver 1967 quarter was found in a box of old coins from a grandfather's estate, completely worn, tarnished, and overlooked. But when weighed, it came in heavier than a normal clad quarter. Sent for testing, it was confirmed, struck on a silver planchet. That coin later fetched a stunning $421,000 at auction, and it had visible wear. A circulated coin that was mistaken for junk. Even beyond the silver strikes, some 1967 quarters are known for major off-center errors. Coins struck so wildly off mark that part of the design is missing, or the entire coin is shaped irregularly. One coin, struck 60% off-center, sold for over $18,000, and another with a partial collar strike, where the edge was misaligned and flat on one side, went for nearly $9,500. Let's talk design for just a moment. The obverse still features the classic George Washington bust, but look closely at the lettering. A handful of 1967 quarters exhibit a double die obverse, with noticeable doubling in Liberty and In God We Trust. That variety alone, when certified, can command prices above $7,000, even in circulated condition. And then there's the truly bizarre, circulated look on the other. The result? A Frankenstein dime. Part proof, part business strike, and totally not supposed to exist. One of these weird double personality dimes surfaced in 2004, and it sent shockwaves through the numismatic world. Despite being worn and lightly circulated, that one coin sold for $121,000. Why? Because it was never meant to be released to the public. It slipped out. It escaped. And if there's one, there could be more. But that's not all. Even more frightening for collectors, the rare double denomination error. That's when a dime is accidentally struck on a pre-struck penny. Yes, a coin that was already a cent, turned into a dime. These crazy 1996p double denomination pieces have been authenticated by PCGS and NGC, and they don't just look strange, they look melted, misaligned, distorted, like something from a horror movie. The value? One of these 1996p double denomination dimes sold for a stunning $198,000 in bad condition. That's right, it looked awful. It was bent, flattened on one side, and had rim damage. And it still brought in more than most luxury cars. So what do you look for? If your 1996p dime has a ghost-like mirrored surface on just one side, that could be a proof die error. If it shows signs of a different design underneath, like Lincoln's silhouette behind Roosevelt, you may have a double denomination strike. If it feels too thick, too thin, or just plain weird, get it weighed. If it comes in light or heavy, you might be holding gold. It's the kind of mistake that should have been caught. Next up, we've got a 1973 Roosevelt dime, minted in Philadelphia, and in circulated condition. Worn down, probably faded on the edges, the kind of coin that's passed through thousands of hands. And yet just one of these, one single mistake from this year, turned into a six-figure thunderbolt in the coin collecting world. And here's the twist. The 1973 dime was never supposed to be special. At least that's what we all thought. Let's break it down. By 1973, the U.S. Mint had gotten its groove back after the chaos of the 1960s coin shortages. Philadelphia alone struck over 384 million Roosevelt dimes that year. They were everyday workhorses. No silver, no precious metals, no special releases. So how did a dime from this common year in this plain old condition end up being worth more than $200,000? It all started with a tiny, nearly invisible mistake. Some of the 1973 Roosevelt dimes were struck with what numismatists call a reverse die clash. That means the dies, the metal plates used to strike each side of the coin, smashed into each other without a coin between them, leaving behind ghost-like outlines of one side, imprinted onto the other. And when coins started being struck afterward, they carried that haunting, mismatched image. Imagine it, Roosevelt's face on the front, but with faint outlines of a torch and olive branch bleeding through from the back. A dime haunted by its own design. But that's just the beginning. The true star of 1973 is a coin that slipped past the Mint's strict quality control. A Roosevelt dime struck on a silver planchet, a leftover blank from 1964, long after silver coins were discontinued. This shouldn't be possible, but somehow one of these 90% silver blanks got mixed in, and the 1973 die struck it clean. The edge, no copper core, the color, bright, pale, and silver all the way through. When that rogue silver dime hit auction in 2018, collectors knew exactly what they were looking at. The hammer dropped at $245,000. And that coin had scuffs, rim nicks, and light surface wear. Still, nearly $250,000 just for being in the right place at the wrong time. But there's more. Some 1973 dimes have also surfaced with rotated dies, meaning the front and back of the coin aren't aligned. Flip the coin vertically, and Roosevelt should stay upright. But in these error coins, he's upside down or tilted 45 degrees. That alone can raise the value from 10 cents to over $30,000, especially if the rotation is dramatic. And here's where it gets exciting for you. Circulated condition doesn't matter nearly as much as rarity. Many of these legendary errors were found in pocket change, coin rolls, or even tossed into junk bins at flea markets. The silver planchet, that was a lucky roll search. The die clash, pulled from a convenience store cash drawer. These weren't museum finds, they were real-world discoveries found by regular people. Light. Finally, we have a 1978D Roosevelt dime, struck at the Denver Mint. And let's be honest, this one's in bad condition. Worn smooth, dings on the rim, maybe even some grime built up in the crevices. Looks like pocket change, right? Just another old dime that's seen better days. But hold on. This coin might be hiding a shocking secret that's blown away professional collectors. Because one of the most unbelievable mint errors of the late 1970s happened right here with a 1978D. And it all comes down to a bizarre, once-in-a-generation mistake: the wrong metal, wrong planche, and wrong press. Let's set the stage. In 1978, the Denver Mint was moving fast, striking hundreds of millions of coins, not just dimes, but nickels, quarters, and foreign coins too. And when multiple coin types are being made under the same roof, things get messy. That year, something wild happened. A small batch of 1978 D Roosevelt dimes were accidentally struck on planches meant for foreign coins, including aluminum and brass blanks that were never supposed to be used for U.S. currency. And the results? Downright freakish. Some 1978 D dimes have been discovered that are way too light, not 2.27 grams like they should be. Instead, they weigh closer to 2.0 or even 1.7 grams, a dead giveaway that they were struck on a foreign aluminum planchet. And the color? A dull, dusty gray instead of the typical copper-nickel clad. One of these error dimes, badly circulated and nearly worn slick, was authenticated by PCGS and sold for an incredible $184,500. That's nearly $200,000 for a dime in worse condition than the one you might have sitting in your junk drawer right now. And that's not the only nightmare that came out of Denver in 1978. Another batch of 1978 D Roosevelt dimes were discovered to have been double struck, off-center. Imagine Roosevelt's head doubled and shifted halfway off the coin, the torch and olive branch completely misaligned, some looked melted, some looked twisted, and collectors, they went absolutely wild. One confirmed example of a double-struck, off-center 1978 D Roosevelt dime sold for $96,000, and guess what? It looked horrible. No luster, scratches across the face, and major rim damage. But because the error was so extreme and so rare, it became a legend overnight. Here's what to watch for in your own 1978 D dimes. Weigh your coin. If it's off by more than 0.1 gram, huge red flag. Check the edges. No copper line, could be a silver or foreign planchet. Look closely at Roosevelt's face. Is it doubled? Off-center? Misaligned? Moving on, we land in 1990. Denver Mint. At first glance, this quarter doesn't inspire much confidence. It's scratched up, beat down, the details are fading. Frankly, it looks like it's been through the laundry, the driveway, and maybe even the dog's mouth. But hold on to your seat, because this battered little coin could be worth a jaw-dropping $390,000 or more. That's right. This rough-looking 1990 D quarter, if it has one of several rare minting flaws, could transform from junk drawer fodder into a retirement-altering windfall. Here's the backstory that changes everything. In 1990, the Denver Mint was in full swing, producing hundreds of millions of quarters. But something strange was going on behind the scenes. New technology was being tested, and mistakes started to slip through. One of the most valuable of these? A tiny but explosive error. A quarter struck on a manganese dime planchet. That's right, this coin was supposed to be a dime, but was accidentally struck with the quarter design. The result? A coin that looks off, a little too small, a little too light, but with every bit of the Washington quarter's bold face. When one of these was discovered, it looked so beat up it was almost thrown out. But a sharp-eyed collector noticed something odd. The coin was missing the full reeded edge, and the diameter was slightly smaller than normal. Sent for grading, it was authenticated as a quarter struck on the wrong planchet. Auction result? A mind-blowing $392,000. And yes, it was in poor condition, because when it comes to errors this rare, condition takes a backseat to rarity. Now here's another twist. A small number of 1990 D quarters were struck with rotated dies. That means the reverse of the coin is upside down when flipped. Most of these weren't discovered until years later by accident. The known examples are few, but collectors have paid over $14,000 for coins with significant rotation, even when the coin is scratched, stained, or worn down. But perhaps the most bizarre find? A 1990 D quarter discovered with a broad strike error, caused when the retaining collar failed during minting. That coin expanded slightly beyond normal size with a smooth, flat edge and distorted features. It sold for $6,800 despite heavy circulation marks. Why? Because the error was unmistakable and nearly impossible to fake. And there's one more jaw-dropper. A rare 1990D Phantom S error has been whispered about in collector circles, a Denver-struck quarter believed to carry a faint San Francisco-style mint mark under the right lighting. Whether it was a die transfer, a mispress, or a wild fluke remains debated, but one example sold privately for $18,000 after being verified as a transitional die mix-up. Let's not forget design. By this point, Washington's bust had become iconic, but in 1990, some demint quarters show signs of die fatigue, where repeated strikes wore down the fine details. Certain pieces also show doubling in the war. Next up, 1994.